Welcome back, my amazing artists. Now that you have all of your pieces cut out for your stuffed monster, it's time to start stitching and sewing. Now you'll notice that I still have my little pieces. If you are finished with these parts of your pattern, you can go ahead and get rid of them. If you are not sure if you still need them, it's best to just be safe and keep them in your bag along with your sketch. So this stuff can go back in your bag. Next up, I'm going to show you how to start stitching. If you are going to have some parts on the front, which most of you do, you are going to need to take this back piece away and put it somewhere else. Now, I think I pointed this out last class that if some of you have some black lines or things you're unhappy with, make sure that those parts are the inside pieces. So what I actually had to do, this was my front, and I actually had to flip it to make sure that the pieces lined up and that those parts were hiding on the inside because I didn't want any of that to show. Now I have laid out my design and I'm happy with it. If you'll notice, I used the tacky glue to glue on the teeth because I just thought those would be way too hard to stitch on there. I also glued the pupil and the purple dot onto my eyeball, but the eyeball itself is actually not attached. So I have 3 parts that I'm going to stitch onto my top layer. So as I said before, you want to get rid of that bottom layer so that you don't get confused because you're only stitching your parts onto the top layer. If you're afraid they're moving around too much, you could either put a little dab of glue on the back to make sure that they kind of stick a little bit. Or the other option is that you could take one of the small pins and you could pin your object in place. If you need help with that, I could help you with that. I'll show you how I did that again on this one. Take your pin through the back, through both layers on the front, in and back. So it is a little pointy on the back layer, but that's okay. Okay? You could do it the opposite way too. It doesn't quite matter. All right. Next, you need to thread your needle. So find your needle. These are tapestry needles. So yes, they are pointy, but they're not as dangerous as some sewing needles. So they're not super, super, super sharp. So when you're pushing through the fabric, you do need to be careful, but at the same time, you do need to push pretty hard because sometimes sometimes they get stuck. It goes through, okay? Now you need to thread your needle and you need to knot the end. So that's where I need to get my threader and I need to go ahead and get a piece of thread or embroidery string. My string for a small sewing area is about from my hand to my elbow. If it's a bigger area, like maybe the mouth, I'll probably make it a little bit bigger. And what I need to do on one side, I need to create a knot. So to create a knot, I'm gonna go ahead and take my string, wrap it around my finger like this. I'm gonna take this top piece and roll it and twist those two together. And when I let go, it should be able to form a knot. Now, if it doesn't work the first time, you could always try it again. That looks like it made a pretty good knot. I'm gonna show you just one more time in case you need to make a double knot. Wrap that around, take the top piece, roll it over, and pull, pull, pull. And we've made a knot, okay? If you have some trouble, you could let me know and I can help you, or there's also another option that I will show you. On the opposite end of your string, you need to find this tail. You need this special paper tool. It's called the threader. Yep, the threader. Really, it's like a little paper taco shell, and you're going to take your string and feed it into the paper taco shell. You don't want a little tail sticking out. It's better if it's actually kind of hiding inside. You're going to take this threader, since it's nice and thin, and you're going to pass that through the eye of your needle. The eye is a fancy name for the hole of your needle, and that will help you get the string through. Once I have the threader through, I'll go ahead and put that to the side. I don't need a really, really long tail, but you don't want a really, really short tail, because then it will probably pull right back out and you'll have to use the threader very often. So make sure you have a little bit of a tail, but not too long. And while you're sewing, it's actually best if you hold your needle and thread exactly where they touch, right here. If you hold on the needle while you're pulling, you might accidentally pull this out. If you're holding the thread, you'll probably lose the needle as well. So I like to leave a tail about an inch or so, and I like to hold the needle and thread exactly where they meet, and that way it won't come loose. Okay, for our first stitch, the running stitch. The running stitch goes under, over, under, over. I'm gonna start with my eyeball, and I'm gonna start from the back. Remember what I said about going through 2 layers? It might be kind of tricky at first, so find the spot where you think the needle's gonna go through and use your finger to kind of push through to the other side. If you can't go through both layers at once, you might need to just go through 1 layer at once and then line it up with the second layer and poke that through. Ta-da. And once I pull it out the other side, remember, if I pull here, I might lose my string from my needle. So I'm going to pull, pull, pull right where the needle and thread meet. Pull, pull, pull all the way until my knot stops. If you don't have a knot, you want to leave a little bit of a tail, probably about an inch or so. If you do have a knot, you can pull, pull, pull all the way. The running stitch goes under, over. So that went top to bottom. I think I'll go this way first. I'll skip a little spot and push down into my next layer. This green layer of felt is really thick. Okay, oops, it looks like I didn't pull, pull, pull all the way through. There we go, make sure that we don't leave that. Oh, I almost lost my thread. All right. Now I'm gonna skip a spot and come up a little bit next door to that. Pull, pull, pull. At the very end, what you need to do is make sure that you have enough of a tail to tie a knot. Sometimes that means you have to pull this little string very close to your needle and hold on tight. You're going to go through one of these first stitches. So I came from that direction. I want to go through this stitch. You could go through that one, but I like to go through this one better. Pull. This will make a little bit of a loop. And if you can fit your needle through that loop, you can go around it this way. You can go around it that way. That will create a nice knot. You can do that several times. The sturdier knot will be. So if you can do it at least twice, that works out pretty great. If you can't fit your needle through, you might have to take the needle off and use your hand to fit it through that little loop. Pull, pull, pull that tight. When you cut that off, you don't want to cut off too much of it. Since it's the inside, you won't see it. There you go. And that's how you stitch something on. You can take your pin out and you can go ahead and stitch your other parts on. I just wanted to show you another option. If you can't go through one of those loops, you could leave a little end. And if you have a little end here, you could tie a knot just like that. So next you'll need to sew both sides together along the edge with a whip stitch. Make sure all of your details are attached first. Line up your top and bottom layer and use 2 to 3 pins to hold your layers together so that they don't come apart while you are sewing. You will want a pretty long piece of string, about the length of your arm to the opposite shoulder. Make sure to knot the end and to use the threader to thread your needle. You're going to start your whip stitch between the top and bottom layers to hide your knot. Next, push your needle up through that top layer, keeping your stitches pretty close to the edge but not too close. Push your needle from the bottom to the top, just a bit to the side of the first stitch, and pull, pull, pull all the way through. Continue this all the way around the edge, pulling as you go. Try your best to avoid any bunching or any knots that might happen. If you come across a knot that you can't fix, or your thread becomes bunched up and you need some help, or you need to add some more string, stop what you're doing and ask for help. Another helpful hint is if you're having trouble getting the needle through both layers, start through with the bottom layer and use the table to push the needle up through both layers at the same time. You can see that's what I'm doing here. I'm using the table to kind of push that needle through. Sometimes it goes through easily, but sometimes not so much. Continue your whip stitch all the way around the edge of your stuffed monster. Be sure that you don't close the entire thing and that you leave a space about the width of your hands for the stuffing. We will stuff that in small pieces, being sure to get into all the small little spaces and nooks and crannies. If your string is too short to fill in the rest of the whip stitch around the edge, I can help you add a small piece, and once we're finished, we'll end it with a knot.